Hey y'all, so tonight was the second episode of American Crime Story Impeachment, or Impeachment American Crime Story. I really should get that straight for being as big of a fan of the show. Maybe I'm just a little bit off because they liked my tweet and I'm kind of freaking out about it. This episode was great. I personally think it really outshined the first one, but let's get into exactly the reasons I feel that way. So from a film/technical perspective, this episode, there's just a lot I noticed. First and foremost being the intense shift in color grading between the Pentagon and the White House. The Pentagon is very desaturated, cold, mostly grays, but like cool gray tones, less lively of a place, kind of just downtrodden and forgotten, whereas the White House is very warm and colorful and has a lot of those livelier, more saturated tones. And I think honestly that goes to represent what the Pentagon represents for both Monica and Linda. It truly is the island of exiles, as the first episode was titled, because it's all of their good memories, their happy memories, both for Monica with her relationship with the president and Linda with her job. Those happy memories are associated with the White House as a physical space, whereas the Pentagon is where both of them have those things taken away from them. So I absolutely love that technical choice. So good. The other thing I noticed for the first time in this episode, anytime Monica is with Bill, the camera is a handheld camera and it's shaky, which is very different than like the Pentagon shots, which are all very static, very like one angle shots. And most of the angles within the show and the shots within the show are super static, super like just clean and clear cut, but these are just very messy, and that adds to just the underlying tension and the unsettling nature that like you as an audience member feel being in those scenes. One, because they're usually intimate moments between the two of them that are very awkward when you know how all of this goes down as a viewer living 20 years later. Also because it's made to make us uncomfortable, because this relationship was very uncomfortable. I really like that choice. The best part about this episode for me was the way it paralleled how Linda and Bill both treated Monica, how she believed that both of her relationships with each of them was genuine, and maybe to some naive extent believed that they both really cared about her and weren't ever necessarily looking out for themselves, but ultimately they both go to serve themselves. Now, President was obviously using her in a more personal aspect than Linda was, but Linda is trying to progress her career, get a story, have her get respect, potentially get her job back at the White House. Both of these are adults who are experienced and established in their careers in Washington, who are taking advantage of this newbie in town, this intern turned secretary turned Washington worker, using her to benefit themselves. And I think this was done really well in this episode of how Beanie Feldstein's acting, both with Sarah Paulson, which was so good because she was able to communicate that Linda Tripp, who is clearly being outlined, I don't want to say it's the villain of the story, but as kind of like the antagonistic force of Monica's visions of what her life will be like. Linda is obviously being painted in that negative light. But we get to see here that she's very empathetic, and we get to see why Monica would think, oh, that this older woman is trying to give me advice, she's trying to help me, she's trying to be my friend, because Sarah Paulson plays that aspect of her up so well. Truly makes you question like what you knew or think you know about the case, which every season of this show has done thus far. But I also think Beanie Feldstein's acting in so many scenes with Linda and Bill shows that she's not just this homewrecker that the media at the time was trying to paint her as. She's a person with feelings, with emotions, with wants and needs in terms of her career, her social life, even more towards that point. This episode really paints how Linda is the one emotionally manipulating Monica, because in a couple interviews that are pretty famous of Linda Tripp speaking about Monica and her relationship and kind of their phone calls, is she speaks about how she had to like listen to this child complain or cry about her relationship problems or like all of these meaningless things in Linda Tripp's mind. But really in this episode, and obviously there's drama, I know some of this is fictionalized, a lot of creative liberties taken as they should be taken. It's a television show. Like if you want a documentary, go watch the Clinton Affair, but if you want like fiction, this is where we are. It does such a good job of showing her egg on the relationship so she can get more out of it, so she can withdraw more information. The spreadsheet being an idea. It's so smart the way that they're showing how Linda is trying to extract this information from her in a way that's supposed to make Monica feel more and more comfortable and more secure, to see like how she could be so taken advantage of, because you'd want to think, oh well, if that was happening to me, I would know who my real friends were. Again, these details, these slight production details, because in TV shows like this, I know everything has a choice and a reasoning behind it. I know, like, You can say I'm reading too much into it, but the film studies major in me just has to just bring this out. But when Linda is watching television on the TV in the background as she's unwrapping like her TV dinner, the people on the TV say, I'm trying to be helpful, and the other woman says, are you sure you don't have other intentions, or are you sure there's not another reason or something like that? And it just speaks to what Linda is doing to Monica at that time. Just these little choices in the background that you're not necessarily supposed to notice still feed into the thematic elements of the story. I already said Sarah Paulson is amazing, but Beanie Feldstein really challenges the media image that is Monica Lewinsky. It's so nice to see her think through this relationship logically, be misled, or have her emotions betray her at times, or show that she had friends and she was thinking these things through. And, you know, sure, she was probably highly emotional, as anyone would be when they're perceived to be in a romantic relationship, but I just think she has so much life to the character in the show of Monica Lewinsky, and is really truly challenging how she was presented in the media versus how events actually went down for her in her own life. Quick couple like shout outs before we wrap this one up. The casting of Michael Isikoff, fantastic. The actor, I don't know his name, I will put it on the screen for you. He seems to have the same personality as Isikoff did in the interviews that I watched of him, so that's really interesting. The Unforgettable song, don't know if that's actually the song that was played at the inaugural ball. The lyrics of someone who you think is unforgettable thinking that you're unforgettable. Speaking of Monica and Bill's relationship, such good choices, production team. I love you guys. You're amazing. You make my Tuesdays so fun. Kobe Smulders as Ann Coulter, fantastic casting, amazing. The way that all of these side characters in the show are being weaved very poetically into the story. The main focus is on the women involved in everything, and I think that's very interesting because women are a very, very powerful voting force in our country, and I think it's extremely interesting to show women at the forefront of a political scandal that we think of as being attached to a man, when really there's all of these other women involved. So I think that's a very, very interesting take that this team at American Crime Story is trying to take with this. Last, I think this episode poses a really interesting question, specifically with the Paula Jones media coaching that she's going through. Does it matter who these kind of events happen to? Because it is so easy to, in this case specifically, take the country girl from Arkansas whose first real job was working for the state and dismiss that these things potentially happen to her, or a young intern who you can just easily label as like a homewrecker, a girl just going after not the best intentions in Washington. It's easy to dismiss people potentially and set up, like I said before, that media image. But again, this show is doing such a good job of challenging the media image and portrayal of these different women, asking you as the viewer to think to yourself, but does any of this stuff matter? Like, forcing you to see beyond what the media image. And I think this episode explicitly explores it with Paula Jones the most. It's sad that people couldn't take her word and truthful things that happened to her and say that it's not valid because of who she is or where she comes from or what type of stereotypes she fits into. And so I thought that was a very interesting question that this episode sort of thematically posed. Now that I have used every word in my entire code book, what did you think of this episode? I really loved it. Be sure to like this video if you liked this review. I will be doing them weekly and trying to rush them out to you guys as soon as possible. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss these reviews when they do go live or any of my other videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have an absolutely amazing day or night, and I'll see you in my very next video. Bye, y'all.